I was on my knees in a millionaire's kitchen, scooping cold food off the floor with my bare hands, while the house manager called me a rat, and that was the exact moment the owner of the mansion walked in. I honestly thought that was it for me, that I was going to get fired on the spot, lose my job, lose my only way to buy medicine for my mom. I had no clue that night would rip the lid off everything that was rotting inside that shiny house and turn my life and his completely upside down. The Whitford Estate kitchen was the kind of place you see in magazines, all stainless steel and soft yellow light so clean, the floor looked like glass, so quiet you could hear the hum of the warmer and the air vents, and there I was, this skinny girl in an oversized uniform, pulling open that heavy warmer door with both hands, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears, praying no one would come downstairs. Inside there was a tray of food, cheese meat bread, from some fancy dinner I had helped clear earlier, still warm under the foil. Smelling so good, it made my stomach twist, and all I could think about was my mom, lying in our little rented room on the south side with nothing but stale crackers in the cupboard. I slid the tray into my old canvas bag, tried to cover it with a towel, tried to move like I'd seen grown maids move calm and invisible, but my bag bumped the metal table and a stupid spoon rattled, and that tiny sound might as well have been a fire alarm. I heard the heels before I saw her. Sharp, angry clicks on the hardwood upstairs, the jingle of her keys, the slow, heavy rhythm of someone who knows everyone is afraid of her. And then Victoria Davenport, the house manager, appeared in the doorway like a shadow. "What are you doing here, Harper?" She snapped eyes like knives, and before I could even lie or explain, she yanked the bag off my shoulder, dumped it on the floor, and the container burst open in the soapy water. "Are you stealing now?" she said louder, like she wanted the walls to hear. "This house feeds you to work, not to crawl around grabbing trash like a rat." I dropped to my knees, trying to grab the food, hands shaking so hard I could barely hold anything, stammering that I was just taking it to my mom, that she was sick, that I was sorry. And Victoria grabbed my wrist so hard it burned, pulled my head up by my hair, so the overhead lights hit my face and everyone could see the tears. "Just like that filthy maid of a mother you have," she hissed. "You think because she fell ill this house owes you something rich. People's food is not for your kind. Learn your place." The other night staff heard I know they did, but their eyes stayed glued to the floor, hands scrubbing the same spot over and over, nobody saying a word. And for a second, it felt like the whole world had agreed that I really was nothing. That's when I heard another sound. The garage door opening, a car engine cutting off the soft thud of polished shoes in the hallway. And I saw him, Mr. Thomas Whitford, standing in the doorway, still wearing his coat briefcase in one hand, just staring at the scene like he couldn't quite believe what he'd walked into. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Victoria dropped my wrist like it was on fire and stepped in front of me, voice suddenly sweet. "Mr. Whitford, I was just enforcing the rules. The girl was stealing food." He didn't answer right away, just looked at the food on the floor, at my hands trying to pick up bread out of dirty water, at the way I was hiding my bag behind my back, like maybe I could still save some of it. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but low enough that even the air seemed to listen. "Who gave you permission to treat her like that?" he asked. Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Sir, if I don't keep discipline, this kitchen turns into a marketplace. You know how it is. Charity becomes theft." He turned his head just a little and looked at me. "Why were you taking the food, Lucy?" My throat felt like sandpaper. "I wasn't taking it to eat," I whispered. "I wanted to bring it to my mom, and she's sick. She can't walk. She used to work here. Her name is Olivia Harper." I saw something change in his face at that name, like a memory he'd buried suddenly stood up. Olivia had dusted his office every morning for almost a year, always in thin gloves, always quiet. And one day, she just didn't come back. We got told she'd resigned for health reasons, and that was it. No one asked questions because people like us don't ask questions when we want to keep our jobs. Before that moment, I had only ever seen him from a distance. On the stairs, talking on the phone at the big dining table. A tall man with tired eyes, more like a painting on the wall than a real person. Now he was standing a few feet away from me, looking at me like I was real, like he was actually trying to understand, instead of just hearing noise. "Get up," he said quietly, bending down to pick up the metal lid, and he wasn't talking to Victoria. I scrambled to my feet, terrified and ashamed and weirdly hopeful all at once, clutching my bag. "From now on," he said, turning to Victoria, "this girl does not report to you. I will decide what happens with her." She opened her mouth to argue, but then she saw his eyes and swallowed it back, clenching her keys until they jingled. A few seconds later, his wife walked in, Marissa, in a silk dress and a cloud of perfume blonde hair, perfect face, doing that polite smile rich women do when they see a mess they don't want to touch. "What on earth is going on in here? Why is it so loud?" she asked. And when Victoria told her I had been caught snacking, she waved a hand and said, "Thomas, you don't need to worry about downstairs. Let Davenport handle it. Kids will be kids. Just send her home. She'll learn not to do it again." I blurted out that I wasn't stealing for myself, that my mom was hungry, that this was all we had. And I caught this tiny flicker in Marissa's eyes when I said Olivia Harper, like a crack in perfect paint. But then she smoothed it over and said, "Oh, that one, the maid who quit. Such a shame, she was too frail to keep up." He didn't argue with her, not then. He just said, "Leave it," when Victoria tried to clean the food and walked out. But I could tell something was turning over inside him, like a gear that had been stuck for a long time. After that night, the house didn't change all at once. It never works that fast. But small things started feeling different. And if you've ever lived your life tiptoeing around powerful people, you know how loud small things can be. I would be sweeping in the hallway and notice him watching quietly from the stairs as Davenport barked orders, and her voice would suddenly soften when she realized he was there. He started showing up in the kitchen during lunch, not to micromanage, just to stand by the counter for a minute, asking simple questions like, "How's the food rotation?" while his eyes followed the way we all flinched when Victoria walked by. Most days I still moved like a shadow, sweeping the backyard, scrubbing stairs, folding linens in the storage room, because Victoria said it was good for me to learn the value of work. But there were moments now where I would look up and catch him watching me carefully, as if he was trying to match his version of the house with the one I was actually living in. The first real thing he asked me that felt like a human being and not a boss was in the back garden late afternoon, when my hands were raw from scrubbing moss off the fountain stones. He stepped out on the stone path, loosened tie, sleeves rolled, and said, "Do you do all this by yourself?" I nodded and told him I liked it better out there, that it was quieter than the kitchen. He stared at my hands for a second, red and cracked from cold water. "Did Davenport assign you this?" he asked, and I heard the test in his voice. I shook my head because I was scared, because Victoria had told me if I made her look bad, I'd regret it. I asked, I lied, "If I work more, I can stay longer." He sat down on the edge of the fountain, like he needed to sit to hear what came next. "How's your mother now, Lucy?" he asked. I told him the truth then, that she couldn't walk, that she lay in a bed in a damp apartment on the south side, that the only medicine she got came in a paper bag every week from a pharmacy I'd never heard of, delivered by a driver who said it was all paid for by the master's house. I told him she seemed to get weaker every time she took it, that sometimes she slurred her words or forgot things, and that when I asked Victoria about it, She told me I should be grateful that talking too much was dangerous for people in my position. You could see the guilt land on him heavy and ugly. "Does she see a doctor?" he asked. I shook my head. "Only the medicine Victoria sends. If you need help, you tell me," he said quietly. And I remember I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it sounded like something people only say in movies, and in my world, asking rich people for help was usually the first step to losing whatever little you had left. A few days later, he showed up at our door. No driver, no entourage, just Mr. Whitford, in a nice shirt standing on our crooked little porch, with paint peeling off the railings, looking more out of place than a grand piano in a bus station. I had never been so embarrassed in my life. The air inside our place smelled like damp clothes and cheap sanitizer. The fan rattled in the corner, the light was dim, and my mom, my strong, quiet, proud mom who had kept me fed for years cleaning other people's mess, lay on that thin mattress looking like a ghost of herself, skin-pale eyes half open, but not quite seeing. He walked in slowly, glanced at the empty soup cans on the counter, the pile of pill bottles with labels. No one had bothered to explain the note from some clinic that said, "Reduce movement, monitor neurological reaction." And I watched him realize what I had already known for a while. This was not some minor health issue that made her resign. This was something bigger and darker. "Who gave her these?" he asked, picking up one of the bottles. "Ms. Davenport." I said, "She says the estate is paying for her medicine. She has someone drop them off every week. She told me if I told anyone and made trouble, my mom might lose this help." He didn't say much after that. He just took one of the bottles, folded up the pharmacy receipt with Victoria's signature, put them in his coat pocket, and told me he would look into it. Later on, he told me what he found, and that was the twist that changed everything for all of us. The lab he sent those pills to called him back and told him they were loaded with neuroinhibitors and sedatives, not the kind that help someone recover, but the kind that keep them quiet and weak and easier to manage. Around the same time, he checked the mansion's security system on the date my mom fell down the stairs, and discovered the main video from that day had been deleted by someone using Victoria's admin account. But there was a backup file the system had saved on its own. The recovered footage was short and blurry, but clear enough. My mom mopping the east staircase, Victoria coming out of the storage room behind her. Words exchanged a sudden movement, my mom's body tipping back her hand, grabbing for nothing, then her on the floor, and the camera tilting. He also had the vitamins Marissa had been handing him, tested the ones she said were good for his memory and stress, and it turned out there was a mild sedative mixed in there too, just enough to keep him foggy and tired, so he wouldn't notice too much. And as if that wasn't enough of a betrayal, when he started following his wife's spa days, he caught her slipping off to a restaurant downtown, meeting another man, her wedding ring off, laughing in a way she hadn't laughed at home in years. I didn't know all of this while it was happening. I was still downstairs getting scolded for working too slow, being forced to sign overtime confirmation papers. I didn't understand, listening to Victoria whisper, that if I ever talked about my mom or the fall, they'd have her moved out of the hospital or dumped in some public ward where no one would care if she lived or died. But I felt the tension in the house building like static. The staff were jumpier. Victoria's eyes followed me like a hawk. Marissa was home less and less, and Mr. Whitford was suddenly everywhere. In the garden, in the kitchen, in front of his computer. Not drifting through like a tired ghost, but wide awake watching, writing things down. The night everything finally blew up, he asked Marissa to have all the main staff stay for dinner, said he wanted everyone together for once. And if you've ever been the help at a table where you don't belong, you know how thick the air can get. I was carrying soup bowls out tray, wobbling a little in my hands, trying not to look at anyone when I noticed a folder on the table in front of him, his phone beside it. He didn't touch his food. He just cleared his throat and said, "Before we eat, I want to talk about what has been happening in this house." He started with the lab results, how the medicine Victoria had been delivering to my mom would actually keep her from healing. How the pills Marissa gave him weren't just vitamins, how expense sheets had been signed and adjusted behind his back. He played the recovered staircase footage on the big screen, my mom falling Victoria behind her, and the room went ice cold. Victoria started shaking, whispering that she had just been following orders, that Marissa didn't want trouble, that my mom had threatened to go to HR, maybe even go public, and that they had to protect the Mercer image. Marissa snapped at her to shut up, said she was exaggerating, tried to spin it like Rosa was unstable and they had been trying to help, and you could see years of polished lies cracking right there at that table. Then he put his phone on speaker and played the audio of Marissa in that restaurant with another man laughing, her voice soft, in a way it never was at home, and for the first time since I'd known her, she looked like the mask had been ripped away, and she was just caught. "You used my name, my house, my money to hurt the people who trusted us, and keep me in the dark while you lived whatever life you wanted," he said. And there was no yelling in it, just this deep, tired truth. When he said he had already called the police, that they were at the gate with warrants, Victoria almost collapsed, repeating that she was just a servant doing what she was told. Marissa called him dramatic, hissed that he was throwing his life away, that these things were supposed to be handled quietly. But the officers walked in, the charges were read, and I watched the two women who had controlled my life for the last year. The woman who held the keys and the woman who signed everything, being led out past the same kitchen where I had once eaten off the floor. You'd think that would be the end, but stories like this don't tie up that neatly. My mom had months of rehabilitation ahead of her nerve damage to fight through trauma that doesn't just disappear because the bad guys got in trouble. Mr. Whitford had to sit through interviews and lawyers and reporters, asking if he had really not known what was happening under his own roof. Some people believed he was just as guilty for looking away. Some said he was a hero for stepping up when he finally saw it. Me. I was somewhere in between for a while, sitting at my mom's bedside in the guest house. He moved us into watching her practice, moving her fingers, listening to her say in that hoarse voice, "Lucy." He woke up late, but at least he woke up. Over the next year, the estate changed shape around us. The kitchen stopped being a war zone and started smelling like bread and coffee in the mornings instead of bleach at midnight. Staff that had been too afraid to look each other in the eye started laughing again. My mom learned to stand with a cane, then walk a few steps on her own. I got my own small room near the back garden, with a real bed and a window that opened onto the pond, and in the afternoons, after my online classes, I would water the flowers and bring little vases of daisies to his desk. Sometimes I'd catch him sitting there with his journal open instead of business reports, writing about people instead of profits. One day, I baked a small cake with the new chef, wrapped a slice in clean white paper, and carried it to my mom. And the memory hit me so hard, I had to sit down. A year before, I had been shoving soaked bread into my canvas bag, praying it wouldn't be noticed, and now I could hand my mother something fresh and say, "This is just for you, not leftovers." There was this moment on the porch, not long after, where the three of us were sitting together. My mom in her chair with a book in her lap, me with dirt on my hands from the garden, him with a cup of coffee. And the house behind us didn't feel like a prison or a palace, just a home. And I remember thinking, so this is what it's supposed to feel like when people with power decide to actually use it right. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it fixed everything, or that I forgot the nights I cried from hunger, or the way Victoria's fingers felt digging into my wrist. or the way Marissa looked at me like I was a stain on her carpet. Because those things stay with you, you know what I mean? But I can say this. I walked into that kitchen scared to death and ready to take whatever humiliation I had to take to keep my mom alive. And I walked out of this whole story knowing that my life is worth more than crumbs off anyone's plate. So I want to ask you now that you've heard my side, who do you think was really the worst in this story? The house manager who screamed and shoved and signed for poison, the wife who smiled and used money and medicine as a leash, or the millionaire who let himself stay blind until the truth smashed right into him? Do you think what he did at the end makes up for not seeing sooner, or is some damage just too deep to forgive? Have you ever worked or lived in a place where people like my mom and me were supposed to stay quiet and grateful, while the ones at the top did whatever they wanted? If you have, I want to hear about it in the comments. Who did you relate to more, my mom, me, or even Thomas? And do you believe people who abuse their power like that deserve a second chance, or should some doors stay closed forever? If stories like this make you think about justice, about power, about the quiet people in the background who see everything hit, like, share it with someone who needs a wake-up call and tell your own story below, because sometimes the only way houses like that really change is when enough of us stop eating in silence and start talking.